recording from the First Star Logistics Studios today, and we're still part of the Dave Lapham in the trenches. But we're turning the table on Mr. Lapham today because I've had the chance to watch him do this to some of the many guests he has. And but today, Dave Lapham, former Cincinnati Bengal. Fans love Dave Lapham, have for many, many years. And we've known Dave, since him coming to the Bengals in the third round of the 1974 NFL draft out of Syracuse University, and 10 seasons with the Bengals. And Dave, first, thank you for taking the time and doing this. I appreciate it. And I'm a big fan. I've had the chance to know you for several years. Did a couple of sideline parts when you were doing some of the high school games on Thursday nights. And I've had the chance to watch you work these podcasts and vcasts, whatever you want to call them, with some great people. And but first, we're going to turn the tables on you. And this, as I hear you say often, Dave Lapham, this is kind of the walk back of your life.
There we go. I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks very much.
10 seasons with the Bengals, Dave. And you grew up, in Wakefield, Massachusetts. First off, let's talk about what life was like for you as a child in Massachusetts.
Well, I grew up a little northeast of Boston, and as a result, all Boston residents are big Boston professional sports fans, and I was no exception. Red Sox, I could tell you, every single starting player in the 1967 Impossible Dream Boston Red Sox baseball team. Ted Williams was, one of my favorite players. Carly Yastrzemski, one of my favorite players, obviously, and then also a huge Boston Celtics fan. When I was growing up, the Celtics won 11 championships in 13 seasons. And they had a stretch there with Bill Russell and Sam Jones, Casey Jones, and Sat Sanders, and all the guys who played for the Celtics. So it was a great time to be a Boston Celtics fan. The Boston Bruins had Bobby Orr. That was just a dynamic time to be a Boston Bruins fan. And then of course the Patriots, the Boston Patriots, they shared Fenway Park with the Boston Red Sox, and Babe Curley was the quarterback that I grew up loving. And Jim Nance out of Syracuse University, a big fullback, was a guy that ran the ball for the Boston Patriots. I was a big fan of his, and I remember going to my first Patriots game at Fenway Park when I was pretty young, as well as Red Sox game, like 7, 8, 9 years old, and just thinking, boy, if only one day I could be an athlete like those guys playing a professional sport. That's your job? You're going to be kidding me. You're getting paid to be an athlete? Sign me up. When can I start doing that? It was every young kid's dream, and I was fortunate enough to live that dream for a decade with the Bengals and a couple of years in the USFL with Donald Trump, former president of the United States, owner of the New Jersey Generals.
Dave, you grew up, you went to Wakefield Memorial High School. You're one of those guys we don't see as often in today's world of high school sports. 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, track. You earned 10 letters overall, was captain in all 3 sports. Talk about the importance of sports during your high school and growing up.
Yeah, it was part of my everyday life, just if there was a sport, I wanted to participate. And I was a catcher in baseball up until my sophomore year in high school. And I was tracking to be pretty good, putting the shot and throwing the discus. So I had to make a choice between the track team and the baseball team because there were too many conflicts. And the coaches were like, you're just going to have to pick one. So I gave up, hung up the tools of ignorance. And those days of being a catcher were put on the back burner and started focused on putting the shot and throwing the discus. And that was the sport that, as a freshman in high school, I was able to play, participate in the varsity. So I got 4 varsity letters in track and field. Then I got 3 in football, so we had a freshman football team, and 3 in basketball because we had a freshman basketball team, but lettered in the varsity as a sophomore, junior, and senior in those other 2 sports. And man, it was just part of the everyday life, man. Wake up, get some breakfast, go to school, get ready for practice after school, never take the bus home from school, never walk home from school because you had a practice to go to. would have been lost if I didn't have a practice to go to after school. I think it was just part of my everyday life. I wanted to do something with respect to athletics on a day-by-day basis for sure growing up.
Football becomes the sport of the passion, becomes the sport of your future. Who introduced you to the game of football?
Really, it was older kids in the neighborhood. I have a brother that's a year older than me who ended up getting a football scholarship to Bates, and he and I would just go, looking for a game in the neighborhood. We had pretty good sized neighborhood, a lot of kids, a lot of different age kids. Both of us were bigger kids for our age, so we were playing with kids that were quite a bit older than us. But that was if you wanted to play, you had to suck it up and take your lumps and go against kids maybe 5 years older than you. If you were 9 years old, you were playing against 13, 14-year-old kids, and that was an adjustment, not necessarily from a size standpoint, but maturation and understanding your body a little bit and all the things that go along with it. So that was my indoctrination, and faced some challenges doing it, but really loved it and wanted to continue to do it. And playing against kids like that made you better faster. I mean, it was like Darwinism, man, survival of the fittest, and you were just trying to do everything you could to survive.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Today, high school athletes, they choose to specialize as far as one sport. Do you feel that they're missing out on these once-in-a-lifetime experiences by playing multiple sports?
I do, honestly. I mean, I think that high school basketball made me a better college football player, better high school football player, better college football player. Probably helped me make it into the National Football League because of movement, footwork, lateral movement skills. Basketball taught you body control, taught you a lot of things, and I think there's always something from one sport that you can apply to another. And then when I was doing the field events with the track and field team, would lift to get stronger, to put the shot and throw the discus, and that would help football as well, and work on explosion. Coming across the shot put ring and turn your hips and try to explode and put the shot. And same thing with the discus, do the spin and release the disc. I just think that all of that overall body strength, body control, working muscle groups you normally wouldn't work if you just focused on one particular sport. I do think that had an impact on overall development from an athletic standpoint. Plus, we won a state championship with the track and field team that I would have never been a part of if I didn't participate in that particular sport. So I think the friendships and bonds that you make with athletics are lifetime things. And I think the more you can experience it, the better off you are as you're growing up.
After high school, you choose Syracuse University. Let's talk about, in today's world, recruiting is so much different. You have
Right.
Twitter and you have guys doing videos and putting hats on the table. Talk about your experience going through the recruiting process.
Yeah, it was a lot of phone calls. I mean, there was no internet. There wasn't anything. I mean, coaches weren't banging you on computers, or there wasn't any kind of texting or Twitter or anything. I mean, it was the old-fashioned way on the landline phone. Coaches calling every night, interrupting your dinner. Mother not happy about that. They'd try to be courteous with them when they called and all that sort of thing. Then they would make personal visits to your home, literally sit down in your living room with your parents and yourself, and pitch the school, then schedule visits, and you would choose the schools that you wanted to go visit and have a weekend at that particular institution, and then try to make decisions from there. So it was more of it was an interesting process, much different process. We weren't bothered on a day-to-day basis as much as you are all day long, but still it was competitive, and coaches were trying to get their calls in, as many days as they could. And there were no rules yet prohibiting, you can only make X number of phone calls a day. So coaches were calling pretty frequently, and it was an interesting time for sure.
You end up picking Syracuse, but what other schools were you considering besides Syracuse?
Yeah, I got accepted to Harvard and Dartmouth, Cornell, Princeton. I get accepted to all the Ivy League schools, and I was my mother graduated at the top of her class in high school, and she ended up going to Boston University when women weren't going to college. So a big deal for her was education, and she would always say to me that the sports are great, but for every hour you give me every hour you have on a practice field, you have to give me a half an hour of homework. So if I have a 3-hour football practice, she wanted me to hit the books for an hour and a half, and I'm like, I may not have an hour and a half of homework. I understand what the teachers are saying. It might not take me that long. And so she said, well, you're going to read, and I'm going to pick what you read. You're not going to read Mad Magazine and comic books. You're going to read Moby Dick by Herman Melville. She'd have the books and the authors all set up right there. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I formed good study habits and, graduated like 9th in my class out of 400 and whatever kids, and ended up getting accepted to all these Ivy League schools. And she was very upset that I didn't go. I got accepted to Harvard and Ivy Leagues and didn't go. I told her that I was just looking for the best combination athletically and academically. And back when I was coming out of high school, graduated in 1970 out of high school, there was Calvin Hill and guys like that, but there weren't many linemen coming out of the Ivy Leagues playing in the National Football League. And I thought I needed to play at a little bit higher level of competition if I wanted to try to fulfill that dream while still getting a good education. I tried to sell her on the fact that the best combination athletically and academically was Syracuse. They had the Maxwell School of Citizenship at that time. I was thinking about going pre-law. Thought I'd be Perry Mason, I guess. And the Maxwell School was one of the best in the country for undergraduates for pre-law. And I was doing fine academically. I found I just didn't like the law books like I thought I would. But I changed my major to the Newhouse School of Communications, which is one of the top institutions undergraduate for communications work. And I thought, if I am lucky enough to play football, I can either coach or get into the broadcast world or things of that nature potentially. So I was trying to think ahead a little bit. And she wasn't buying it, but I ended up selling it. She didn't speak to me, I think, my whole freshman year, but I think she realized that ultimately the decision ended up being a good one.
At Syracuse, you played for a Hall of Fame head coach, Ben Schwartzwalder, but he wasn't your ordinary college football coach. We're talking about a man who was a paratrooper, who took part in Normandy's invasion,
Yep.
Battle of the Bulge. He earned a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and 4 Battle Stars, all before starting his college coaching career. What do you remember most about your head coach at Syracuse?
That he was, a war hero. I looked at him as a hero. He wasn't real big in stature, physically. Ben he was not a big man, but boy, from an abstract way, he was huge. He cast a huge shadow. He was, like I said, a hero to everybody in the country, and I just I had nothing but respect for him. And I remember my senior year when I was elected captain, having meetings with Ben Schwartzwalder. He had that gravelly, his voice sounded like 2 bricks rubbing together, and he would do grass drills, up downs, where we'd run in place, hit the ground, jump up, run in place, hit the ground, jump up, full equipment. It was a big conditioning drill. And the whole while we're doing this conditioning drill, at 65 years old, he's doing military push-ups. The whole time we're doing grass drills. So very disciplined guy. I had a lot of respect for him. He'd come in the weight room and, 65 years old again, just start doing nothing crazy, but he'd still hit the weights, and a very disciplined guy. He had great football players. He had Ernie Davis, Jimmy Brown, the list goes on and on. He won a national championship back in 1959, and he was very highly respected, very well respected. Paul Brown had a ton of respect for Ben Schwartzwalder, and vice versa. When I got drafted by the Bengals, my hometown had a night for me and the dinner and all that. And Ben came to it. That meant the world to me that Ben Schwartzwalder would come to something like that, travel that distance, come to my hometown for a dinner for me. And so I have just a tremendous amount of respect for him, not only as a football coach, but as a man, as a human being.